Do tight hip flexors mean they are weak? No, no. I ran into word traps when I first got into the world of corrective exercise. Um, so much of the literature said weak is tight, or I'm sorry, inactive muscles are tight, weak muscles are tight, overactive muscles are dense and tight. You know, everybody tried to associate words for each specific feeling. There's no one conclusive. If a muscle's tight, it's weak. If a muscle's tight, it's overactive. If a muscle's tight, it's underactive. If a muscle's tight, it is basically dormant and incapable of function. There's no real clear correlation between muscle sensation and function. What we can say is that when a muscle is not able to regulate function properly, you are most likely going to experience tension, whether that's a flexibility issue, whether it's a mobility issue, whether it's a strength issue. We can't put it into one box and call it a day. Most tight muscles are a signal to work. That's ultimately what the sensations boil down to. Tight muscles are not a trigger and a sensation to be lengthened. They're oftentimes a trigger to be shortened. You're feeling like when your hip flexors work, what you're doing is you're shortening them, and that's getting rid of the tight sensation. So a lot of the times where what we're feeling can be quite confusing is how we're interpreting sensations from the muscles. Sometimes people will feel a sensation and label that as tight, when really it's the sensation of, Brian, hey, we need to move, and you need to move us now. We are not getting the stimulation we need. I started to see the answer of tight muscles clearly when I started to understand the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, and the digestive system, and the lymphatic system. Every system in our body, even our skeletal system, requires movement to function. Every system requires muscles for everything else to move. Our heart alone, there's reason why there's pumps in muscles, because when a muscle moves, it helps aid our heart and circulation. When our hips move, how our musculature and anatomy is arranged helps create peristalsis and gets food to move through our digestive tract. Our body requires high levels of movement and stimulation for proper regulation of all systems. In seeing how muscular function regulates virtually every other system we have, you get to start to see that your nervous system communicates not in black and white language, but in language of sensations. And most tight muscles are called to move because systems are not being regulated. And muscular systems are the same thing. Muscular systems need movement for regulation. Things get very tight, stiff, and atrophied when we don't move. How the nerves communicate with muscles, it becomes almost like this fatigued, lagging network of communication. And when you activate these hip flexors, when you strengthen them, you're improving the synapses of how the nerves communicate with the muscles. You're changing how electrolyte balance functions in the muscle groups. You're improving calcium regulation to improve contractions. You are literally, when you move a muscle, saying, hey guys, here's how you work. I'm going to remind you of how you're going to work. And when a muscle is reminded how to work, it doesn't have this spastic, tense quality to it. It actually can lengthen and move again. And this could be a really long rant, so just raise your hand if we need to move on here. But one of the greatest challenges of our modern environment is that we don't really require movement much anymore. So we're motion starved. I think it's quite safe with the majority of people in this program to say that their movement problem comes from a lack of movement. Not only just a lack of daily movement, but movement variety. movement, variable movement. Why this program works for people is because it introduces missing function. It introduces the unmet needs of the muscular system in a daily fashion. So we are learning how, every time we do our routine, we are learning how to meet the needs of our neuromuscular system, which then regulates everything else. That's why people probably feel more calm. Most people do their routines before night because it helps them sleep. It tames the emotional and nervous system. So I say all of this because tight muscles will happen at the end of a long day, not really from use, right? We haven't really used our muscles often. We've just been traveling. We've been sitting in a car. We've been sitting in a plane. Why are we so stiff? We're stiff because we're lacking motion, not because we're lacking length. We're lacking motion. And motion for most people will significantly reduce muscular tension, far greater than just stretching and tugging and pulling.